So today, our workshop is on understanding the new International Student Cap. This is a series one. This is the first series out of 2 workshops. This session is focused particularly for post-secondary institutions and our employer partners. We will also have an evening 7 p.m. session for international students. This session is brought to you by Devant. Devant is a subsidiary of Academica Group, which has been around for over 20 years. They are the largest company providing research and consulting expertise to colleges and universities. Academica started Devant to help students and graduates get hired in Canada. Now, the word devant in French quite literally means to be in front of. So we believe that our services will bring students in front of their journey to stay, work, and succeed in Canada. A few housekeeping items. All participants have been muted. There's no need to use your video. You should be able to hear via your computer audio device, and the session is currently being recorded. If you do have questions, please insert them into the Q&A function at any time during the presentation. We won't be monitoring the chat function, but please, if you have any questions, you can enter them there in the Q&A function. Today, I'll be your moderator along with my colleague, Sisha. And of course, I'd like to introduce to you our guest speaker, Elizabeth Long. Elizabeth is a leading immigration lawyer and advocate of immigrant and refugee rights. She holds a Juris Doctor Law degree from the University of Toronto and a Bachelor of Arts with honors in psychology from Memorial University in Newfoundland. She also holds a Master of Law degree from Osgoode Hall Law at York University, where she focused on the intersection between immigration and labor and employment law for foreign workers. She's been certified by the Law Society of Ontario as a specialist in citizenship and immigration law, and it's a prestigious list of which only approximately 65 lawyers in Canada belong. So welcome, Elizabeth, and my colleague, Sisha. Before we get started on the presentation, we do want to warm up your fingers. So we have a question for you. It is on Mentimeter, again, menti.com. If you go there and enter the code that you see in front of you, 4306-7977. We'd love to hear where you're from. What student department are you currently serving? And let's see the results. Other is great. Just leave a few seconds there. We see who our audience members are. This is great. The career advisors, admissions, other student life. Wonderful. So we're going to go to the next question and warm up some more. How many international students do you currently support? So we'd love to hear from you. Where are you from? What number of students are you currently serving? Wow, good number, a large number, having 1,000 to 3,000 student services. Amazing. And quite a few, over 5,000 students. That's fantastic. And last question before I hand over the floor over to Elizabeth. Do you anticipate the CAP policy affecting the reduction of student enrollment at your institution? And if so, what do you think the reduction is? Is it 5 to 10%, 10 to 20, maybe no change, a significant change? We'd love to hear your thoughts on how this policy affects the student enrollment at your institution. Wow, great number, between 10 to 30%. And even sometimes over 40%. It'll be an interesting result here. Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to now pass it over to Elizabeth. Welcome, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much for having me here today. Yes, so I'm going to just go through the presentation, and if you guys have questions, please put them in the Q&A, and then we will go through them at the end. All right, let's get started here. Okay. Okay, are you seeing the right screen now?
We are, yes.
Yes. Okay, excellent. Okay, so there has been a tremendous amount of new announcements for students. So let's get into it. The first of all, there's a cap for 2024 and moving forward. Now, it's a little bit of a question as to what the actual number is, because there was an announcement that there was 360,000, but recently there was a minister's instructions that said that there was 606,000, which is significantly more for the cap. They had excluded master's, PhD students, grade schools, and people who are applying for study permit extensions here. The students who applied for study permits as of December 7th, they can work full-time until the end of April. No more extensions of the postgrad work permit. So there were temporary policies last year and the few years before where they did allow students whose postgrad work permits were going to expire to extend their work permits for 18 months. That is now over. The government has said, we're not doing this anymore. There are no more spousal work permits for non-masters and PhD students who have yet to get their work permits. So for those people who already have their work permits, they can extend their work permits. But for those who don't have them yet, they are canceling that. Master students, irrespective of how many years their programs are going to be, are now getting their 3-year work permits, the postgrad work permits. The financial have increased significantly for each applicant, although, this part isn't too surprising. We often found that even if someone had met them, the previous 10,000 savings mark, that they still were getting rejected if they couldn't show that they had more amounts as well, given the current financial situation. So I think this is a pretty fair situation for single applicants right now. There's a lot of administrative hurdles for applicants, and this is one of the reasons why all study permits right now are paused, because they need to get the provincial attestation letter. Last year, DLIs had to then provide confirmations of letters of acceptance. Now with this new provincial attestation letter, which it's not in place yet, and who knows, if they will be in place in time. But because of that, we can't apply for study permits at the present time anymore. And then public-private partnership college programs are no longer going to be eligible for postgrad work permits. Those who are already currently in the programs are okay, but moving forward, that's going to be out. So quite a lot of announcements for students. What does this really mean? I think it sounds like the government is really encouraging more graduate students, and they're discouraging people with less mature who are have mature family students with families. Perhaps their thinking is that a lot of people who are going through these programs may be looking as a way to immigrate rather than study. However, I think, if someone is studying, they're studying, who knows, but they are certainly discouraging the families with the cancellation of the spousal work permits. And the real situation right now is, they are putting a cap on the students. And the main reason I think it's beyond housing. It's because of the fact that the majority of the students right now, given the numbers and given what their quotas are for permanent residence, it looks like the majority of students may not be able to get permanent residence or have a way to stay in Canada for the long term, given that they're not getting their postgrad work permits extended. If you take a look at the numbers right now, last year, 900,000 international students and 700,000 international workers were in Canada. And the spots for the economic stream permanent residents, and this includes family members, is just a fraction of these numbers. Only half of those, 110,000, are express entry permanent residents. Now, express entry is the most well-known route for most international students to have applied for permanent residence. And previously, the express entry stream was touted as the way that international students can graduate, can immigrate. If you graduate and your English is pretty good, and you have 1 year of work experience before you should be able to immigrate. That was what was being marketed to international students. Now, if you look at the numbers here, certainly, it's probably only around 7% of workers can immigrate. Now, if we're looking at the provincial nominee programs, the other half is where the provinces get to invite people to apply. So really now there's going to be a shift in strategy between just going through the regular express entry route, where the last draw was at the 541, something like that. Normal international students with a year of work experience, most of them likely wouldn't be able to have that level. So we're looking at different. Yes?
Elizabeth, we only see this first slide. Are you moving through the slides?
I'm sorry. Let me
I
just
just want to make sure that
I'm so sorry. Hold on. Let me just make sure that I am. Yeah. Is this
There we go.
now? I'm so sorry. Okay. So so you're seeing the hold on. Let's just make sure. Are you okay? This is right? Okay. So yeah, so now we're really looking at the 100 and looking at the numbers. There's going to be a shift from the normal way that international students are applying to more of the added on arranged employment situations with express entry, looking at alternative programs such as the provincial nominee programs as well. Okay, so first thing I wanted to talk about is how to extend a work permit past the postgrad work permits. Sometimes the students may not even get a postgrad work permit if they're now in the public-private partnerships or they're going to a private school, right? So, and even if they have a postgrad work permit, they can only get a postgrad work permit once in their lifetime. So most of the time with students, we are looking at LMIA job offers. Now, for the most part, for most occupations, the employer would have to advertise and show they can't find a Canadian to do the job before we can apply for LMIA. Also, and this is particularly important for international students, the LMIAs require that the applicant be paid median wage for an occupation. And so an employer, not only do they have to show that they can't find a Canadian to do the job, that salary that they are offering has to meet the median wage. And oftentimes we can see that international students who are just, doing entry level work and getting entry level salaries, the employers aren't going to be willing to raise their salary to that point. However, some are, and there is another stream that I want you to highlight called the global talent stream, which is especially for STEM workers, IT workers, some engineers, etc. If they belong to one of these categories and they are paid the median wage, the employer is not required to advertise. They bypass the recruitment and they only need, it's a processing time of 2 weeks. Instead of recruitment, the employer needs to show that they are going to provide labor market benefits, such as training Canadians, hiring Canadians, etc. So the global talent stream is something that we tend to favor because of the requirement exemption, and also the very fast processing time of 2 weeks for the global talent stream if someone falls within the list of occupations there. Something that is often very unknown by people are the free trade professional work permits. So Canada has free trade agreements with countries such as the US, Mexico, Colombia, Peru, the EU, UK, Australia, Japan, and the list goes on. And with these countries, if you're a national of these countries, then if you have a job offer, and every free trade agreement is different, but with many professional programs, professional occupations, or some technician programs, if you're national of those countries, we bypass the LMIA and we're able to get a work permit based on that. Francophone work permits, if you have someone who can speak at the CLB level of 5 for French, which is just below the entry level you need to get to universities and colleges normally, and they have any job outside of Quebec. It's a job, they used to be high skilled, now it's not even high skilled, it could be low skilled as well. And it's outside of Quebec. They don't have to speak French in the job. It's just that the person has to be able to be fluent in French to the CLB level 5. Then we can get a work permit for them that bypasses the LMIA. The international experience class, these are for younger people. Depends on the agreement, but some countries is under 30 or other countries under 35. They can put themselves into the pool and be invited. There are working holiday work permits, which are open work permits. There are also employer-specific work permits called the Young Professionals Program. And this is a good way to get a work permit as well. Then there are the provincial nomination work permits. So how they work is if you have been nominated by a province while waiting for the permanent residence to be issued, you may be eligible for a work permit based on the nomination. And similarly, bridging work permits. These are work permits where if you have qualified for a permanent residence, you've submitted your application. For example, Express Entry, if you've been invited to apply for Express Entry and you submitted the application, then you can apply for another work permit, which is an open work permit for 1 year while waiting for the permanent residence to be issued. Okay, so these are just some of the most common ways to obtain a work permit if a person does not have a postgrad work permit anymore. It's not for everyone, you don't just automatically qualify for a work permit, but certainly early planning, especially with the employer, would certainly help. Just wanted to go through quickly what Express Entry system is for those who might not know, and then I wanted to talk about arranged employment as well. So Express Entry is a system where you create an online profile. You qualify under one of 3 categories, federal skilled worker, Canadian experience class, federal skilled trades, and then you can get into the online profile and you can create an online profile. Now, once you create the online profile, you get into the Express Entry pool. But just because you've entered the pool, it doesn't mean that you have actually started to apply, okay? When you're in the pool, you have not been counted as applied for permanent residence yet. You're just a candidate. And when you're in the pool, you will get a series of points. You'll get a score called the Comprehensive Ranking System score that's mainly based on your background. If you have a provincial nomination that is express entry based, you get 600 points added to your background. And then the government has a draw where they issue an invitation to apply every 2 weeks or so. Now, during the draw, it could be a general draw where they invite everybody in the pool, or it could be based on category-based draws. Category-based draws are draws where, for example, they might do one for French speakers, or they also have identified certain occupations, STEM, healthcare, transportation, trades. And so if you are one of those occupations, then they will invite only people in those occupations. So when it's the category-based draws, the numbers tend to be a little bit lower, because then they will only invite people who are in those occupations. People talk about express entry like it's a lottery. It is not a lottery. It's basically more akin to skimming the cream, is what they say. So the government invites people who are at the top. And let's say they invite 1,000 people who are in healthcare industries. So then they will look at who is in the healthcare industry, and then who has the work experience in the healthcare industries, and then they will invite the people who have the top marks. Okay, so certainly if your pool is smaller, then the numbers will be smaller. But if your pool is the general draw, then the numbers, the cream is going to be much thicker, and you're going to only, if they only want to invite 3,000 people in the general draw, the numbers will be much higher. So recently, looking at the numbers have just been extraordinarily high. You know, just to give you an idea, pre-COVID, we were looking at 460s, 470s as a number, target number for people to be invited to apply. Last year, you know, the last draw was 547. And I would anticipate the numbers to be at the, you know, 500s for the next year or so, which means that, you know, the factors that someone has to have is much, much higher. And many students, you know, we're looking at not just age is big, language skills, work experience in Canada, work experience outside of Canada, how many degrees that they have. And even with that, a lot of people aren't able to compete. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about is arranged employment. A lot of students now are looking to get arranged employment points with 50 extra points or 200 points for executive managers. Most students will be at the 50 points. And so, you know, what is required for the arranged employment? Because they don't get arranged employment if they have the post-grad work permit. First of all, they get arranged employment if they have a LMIA, or if they have another employer-specific work permit, which is another reason we are looking at some of those work permits that I had spoken about before. Even if they have a postgrad work permit, sometimes we still want to get another employer-specific work permit. If it's not an LMIA, with the employer-specific work permit, they have to have 1 year of work experience with the employer. The length of the position has to be at least 18 months from the date of application, because what the immigration requirement is that someone has a job offer at least 1 year after they get permanent residence. So if express entry normally takes 6 months, then they will need to have 18 months job offer from the date that they are submitting their application to get that 1 year of job offer after they graduate. After they are issued the permanent residence. Certainly, if your job is a permanent job, then certainly that would fulfill that requirement. And then the third thing is the position, of course, has to be a high skill position as well. Okay. Beyond express entry, the second program we would look at is the provincial nominee program. Now, the provincial nominee programs, how they work is each province has made an agreement with the federal government to allow each province to select a certain number of people who they want to get permanent residence. Now, the one thing about provincial nominees programs that you have to understand is that they guard their quotas very jealously, in that if you show that you have an inkling to go to another province, then they will not want to nominate you. So if someone is applying for a provincial nominee program, normally if they are residing in Canada, they should be residing in that province. And also, even if they have received the nomination from the province, after that, they don't have permanent residence yet. They have to apply to the federal government to get permanent residence. And that could take a while. That could take sometimes up to 2 years to get. Until they get permanent residence, they have to reside in that province. After they get permanent residence, the Constitution does allow freedom of movement for permanent residents, so they can leave if their intentions change. But before they get permanent residence, they need to be residing in that province. Now, the reason why I mention this is 110,000 spots available for 2024. So that's almost the same number of spots as express entry. Okay, so that's significant because as express entry points are so high, then we're shifting towards other alternatives. Most provincial nominee programs will require job offers. The only one that is sort of outside of that is the Ontario Masters and PhD programs that do not require any job offers. But otherwise, almost all provincial nominee programs are going to require job offers. And most provinces will favor international students. Some, it'll be okay if you studied in a program, anywhere in Canada, but others will favor students who have studied in a program in their province. And the one thing to note about provincial nominee programs is there are two kinds of provincial nominee programs. There are ones that are linked to express entry. So if they're linked to express entry, if you get nominated under that program, you would then get 600 points added to your express entry profile. And that basically guarantees that you will be invited to apply under express entry. There are other ones that are not express entry based. So if you get nominated under that program, you don't apply through express entry. You have to apply directly for permanent residence. But that one will take 1.5 to 2 years to get permanent residence with the federal government. Express entry normally is 6 months. That one you're looking at 1.5 years or so. So altogether with provincial nominee programs, if they're not express entry based, you're looking at a processing time of at least 2 years. And especially if they require job offers, the person will be required to continue to work with the employer until a decision is made. So I just wanted to quickly go through, there are so many different kinds of provincial nominee programs. I just wanted to give you a little sample of a provincial nominee program that is employer-based. This one is in Ontario, and it's not express entry, okay? So in order to qualify for Ontario's employer-based programs, the employer has to be inside. If their employer is inside the GTA, they have to have a gross income of over $1 million, have at least 5 full-time Canadian or permanent resident employees in the location, and be in business for 3 years. Outside of the GTA, they have to have a gross income of $500,000 3 full-time Canadian or permanent resident employees and be in business for 3 years. The job offer has to be full-time and permanent. So some of the documents, and oftentimes employers have been reluctant to participate in these programs because they are worried about their obligations. They are worried about, what they need to provide to the government. In these kind of cases, oftentimes they also don't want the students or the applicants to see their documents as well. So in these kind of cases, we can often act as the buffer, as the firewall between the applicant and the employer. And normally it's the form. We usually provide an explanation letter, the employment contract, and then the government may ask for future documents to prove if they're not sure. For example, if an employer says, "Oh, I have 5 workers," an officer might say, "Well, okay, show me the PD7As for the 5 workers or the T4s for the 5 workers." Just if they're unsure. Usually, if it's a very large company, they don't need to look at that. Sometimes if they're just on the cusp, they may require some documents, but those documents are not something that we need to provide at the very beginning. So there are 3 streams for this. Now, the international student stream is something where if they have a job offer that's high skilled, then they don't need any work experience. We just have entry wage. They need to have a salary that meets entry level wage, which is lower than which most people can satisfy, but they have to apply within 2 years of graduation. There's another program called a skilled worker. They need to have 2 years of work experience and meet median wage. And then there is one, this is the sort of low skilled, job offer where they're applying in an in-demand stream. And these are specific occupations that are low skilled that have been identified by the government. If they have 9 months of work experience in Ontario in those occupations, they can also apply. Now, the thing to note about the OIMP right now is that they do need to have go through the EOI system where there's a points-based system as well. But age is not one of those factors, which is nice about the OIMP. There are other programs, the RNIP and AIP programs that allow specific communities, Atlantic provinces, or specific select rural and northern communities to apply for permanent residence and work permits if they have job offers there. International students do get an advantage. They're exempt from the work experience requirements. Okay, so here's some advice that I tend to tell employers when they're hiring international students. First of all, they need to understand what their status is. Sometimes the students may have applied for a work permit, they haven't received it yet. They need to provide the documentation to show them, that they have applied, and then afterwards you need to follow up with an update on those. Employers really now need to think long term. They need to understand what options are there for the students, perhaps before they hire them, and also certainly, while they are there, if you want to keep them for the long term, the work permits expire very fast. And so certainly a long-term plan as early as possible is needed. Employers are often required now to provide specific documentation. The letters have to specify certain things. It's not enough to just provide a standard document that you might give to a Canadian when they're, applying for a rental apartment or something. There are specific documents that are required. You need to understand what those specific documentation is. And if you can provide it, it probably would be in your best interest to do so, because the students, they're not just asking for these documents on a whim. They actually need it to get permanent residence. if you are willing to help them, let them know in the beginning. Now, I think the international students, it's not just about getting any old job. It's about getting a job that will help them on the pathway towards permanent residence. Okay, so here's my information. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us, and we're happy to have a consultation with you as well.
Great. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. We see a few questions, so I'm going to pull them up. Quickly, though, there was one question on PNP. There was 110,000 spots available. Question was 110 for all of Canada, or was it only for Ontario?
Oh, all of Canada. Ontario is only a few thousand. Yes.
Okay, great. Just to clarify. And someone also asked, yes, the PowerPoint will be shared, and we will upload the recording on our YouTube, and we will share that link with everyone as a resource. So we're going to start with the first question here. One person asked, in the past, doing 2 one-year programs with no big gap in between the 2 programs will make students eligible for a 3-year work permit. What do you think the length will be going forward for 2 years or 3 years?
I think they haven't announced any changes yet for this. So right now, it's still the same rules for those programs. Yeah.
Okay. Our next question is, why is the number so high for express entry these days?
It's because of how many people are in the pool and how many people they can select. There has been a series of mishaps by the government where, during COVID, they had invited way too many people. And then they just realized that they invited way too many people. And so they had shut down the program for 6 months because
Oh,
they
wow.
realized that or more than 6 months, I think 9 months, because they realized in 2021, in 2021, in November 2021, they realized that they had filled up their entire inventory for 2022 in November of 2021. So they shut it down until July. So because of that, the numbers were building up because they didn't invite anyone.
Right.
Then there was a series of technical mishaps where they had to shut down the program. They didn't invite anyone for a few months here and there. Then it, gradually goes up. And then recently with the category-based draws, where they have specific draws for the categories, which is fine for the people in the categories. But then for the general draws, the number has become much lower that they're inviting for the general draws. So all of that builds up where that cream gets extremely thick. Yeah.
Well, speaking of category-based draw, the next question is person asks, applicants from the category-based draw still need to qualify under one of 3 categories, right? For
Yes.
example, francophone draw applicants still need to qualify under CEC, FSW,
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. You have to qualify in order to get into the pool. Yes.
Okay, wonderful. The question was asked about slides. Okay, I think we answered this one, so we'll pass on that one. I heard that
will be shared too, right? Yeah.
yes, the recording is going to be shared.
Mhm.
I heard that more and more postgraduate work permits are not getting an express entry invitation to apply. And as you mentioned, not everybody can get a bridging program or other extensions. In this case, they just have to leave Canada, or are there other alternatives?
There are significant numbers of people who will not be able to extend their work permits, I think, given the numbers. I mean, 1.6 million and only 200,000 economic spots. That's the math, right? But we can look at different ways. If someone has a job offer in Canada, we can look at different ways to extend their work permits if possible. The LMIAs, they are getting more reasonable now to do. Before, the officers were really, really gung-ho on rejecting LMIAs. Now, recently with the labor shortage, the officers are it's getting a little bit easier with the LMIAs. However, the employers, that's really on the employers to help the students as well.
Mhm.
So Plan early. This is what I'm telling everyone, plan early as possible. It's not impossible for many people to get permanent residence or to get a work permit to extend their stay in Canada. But yeah, the numbers are there. Many people want me to leave.
Right, right. Next question, I think I'm going to need your help because there's a lot of acronyms here, Elizabeth. So, do you think PAL, like the provincial attestation letter, will become part or be included in Section 216 of the regulations, just like CAQ? And the second question is, do you expect PAL to have some eligibility requirements other than LOA and DLI? So let's break down the acronyms first
Yes.
for the audience.
So I think the PIL is the provincial attestation letter. And whether or not it's going to be included in the regulations, I don't know. I don't think they need to. It's part of the ministerial instructions. I think that's going to be there. Do you expect the provincial attestation to have eligibility requirements? That is going to be each province is going to have their criteria. So perhaps I wouldn't put it past the requirement. I don't think it's just going to be a rubber stamp, because if it was, then why do they need the provincial attestation letter? I don't know what the eligibility is going to be for the provincial attestation letter. It could be more on the part of the schools to apply to get the provincial attestation letter, but it all remains to be seen. It's all up in the air.
So announcements has not made yet, and okay. And just for my knowledge, LOA and DLI.
Oh, it's letter of acceptance, which
Okay.
is the letter that the student gets to show that they have been accepted from the school, and the designated learning institutions. Those are the schools that they can actually get study permits from.
Wonderful. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
I just learned some acronyms today, so
Yes, I
wonderful.
know it's full of acronyms.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
Yeah, that's yeah.
So next question, regarding the job offer requirement for the Ontario nominee program, it said that on their website, full-time means a minimum of 1,560 hours a year. Does this automatically disqualify international students, graduates working in elementary and high school, since their full-time is only like 10 months a year?
That's interesting. So it it does it OIMP, it's not just the hours, it's non-seasonal work as well. Now, if they are going to be paid year round, and if they're going to be paid, teachers, for example, still do work in the summer, although, a lot of them, it's much later than normal, right? And so they're still employed for the entire year. That's different than if they are just completely laid off. Then that would not qualify, for example, for employer-based programs.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to do that. Next one. During the pandemic, there was also a special program where postgraduate work permit could apply directly to get PR. The program was announced and the spots available filled in a couple of hours. Do you know if there's another program like that?
There was a TR to PR. I highly doubt that's going to be the case right now. Yeah, highly.
Yeah,
it doesn't look like it right now. Yeah.
Okay. Is there a possibility that new categories will be added to the category-based draws?
Yes, I certainly think that is the case. A lot of it is going to be lobbying the government as to what is needed. I think a lot of it is industry-based, occupations-based, and a lot of it will require lobbying.
This is not part of the presentation, but can you please enlighten us on what the purpose of government about the attestation letters? Like, what's the impact of that?
Well, the impact is that right now we can't apply for study permits, and the delay in the attestation letters is going to be lengthy. And the process is going to be, more complex. What is the purpose? I'm only speculating And I think the government is shifting responsibility to the provinces to say, hey, you guys decide which schools are the ones which programs that you guys want to have. I think there's been a lot of, whether or not you say it's shifting responsibility or whether or not you say it's allowing local communities and to decide what they want. Either perspective, the government, there's that move for the federal government to allow more spots for provincial nominee programs, more spots for community-based programs. In fact, they have said that they wanted to increase community-based programs beyond the RNIP and the AIP as well. And so they're going to allow more communities to decide who they want to get permanent residence as well.
Right. Okay. Shifting responsibility or passing on the responsibility. Who knows? Yeah. As per IRCC announcement on January the 22nd, when the cap came out, students from public-private colleges wouldn't be eligible for work permit from September 24th. But on February the 5th, wording changed, like new enrollments in public-private colleges from now only wouldn't be eligible. So can you please put some context into this, like why the language changed?
I would say that a lot of this stuff in immigration is they're making things up on the fly. And what we go by is not just necessary news releases about what's going to happen. We go by ministerial instructions, or if they have an announcement as to what they qualify for at that time, then it's whatever is on that website and what it states at that time. And the websites do change as well. So which means that the policy, sometimes there are things that change as well, but we go by what is stated on the website as to a particular policy. It's not just enough to get the announcements. So in this case, it does look like students who are currently in the public, which only makes sense, if they've already enrolled in this program, and they've relied on the fact that they are going to be able to get postgrad work permits, that they should be able to get postgrad work permits. So that's what it looks like right now. If people are already in the program, they can get the postgrad work permits, but if they are enrolled afterwards, then they won't be able to.
We have 2 more questions left, and I do want to make time for my colleague as a closing remarks, but 2 questions. First, do you think the RNIP, the rural, will become a permanent program?
I think it's likely going to be. Again, I'm just speculating as a lawyer, but I think it's likely. It's quite successful. Yeah.
Okay. And last question, since study permits will be delayed due to the provincial attestation letters, how do you feel this will affect Canada as a study destination and the EduCanada brand?
I think the governments, they all need to get their act together because it really is something where if you can't get a study permit efficiently and in time for students to start school, and do it in an inexpensive, and inexpensive means not complex way, then then they're really going to lose out on their reputation.
Right. I want to squeeze one more in. Hopefully we can be very quick and pass it on. Will these changes limit the movement of students between provinces for their studies and work for the postgraduate work permit?
Yes, I think that's a great question. I really think that is very much a possibility for sure. Right now, the only thing is that when you apply for a study permit inside Canada, I think you're going to be exempt from the provincial attestation letters. So it could be that if they wanted to change schools, they don't need to get the provincial attestation, but they may need to, instead of right now, they just notify IRCC that they're changing.
Right.
Later on, I don't know for sure, but it could be that they needed to apply for another study. Who knows?
Possibility, high possibility. Okay, great. Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for your time today, as usual. And we do have your contact information in front of everyone if they'd like to reach out. But I am going to pass it over to my colleague Sisha to do the closing remarks.
Thank you so much, Han. What a great discussion, Elizabeth. You're always so informative and helping us to understand, the implications of these IRCC changes and for the PSC community and for our employers who are on this call today. Thank you so much, everyone, for your comments and questions. Based on the recent news and updates, we know that IRCC is considering, this new trusted institution framework across the country. So many of you are already involved in consultations and planning at your institutions. But as Elizabeth said, we still have some uncertainty that we're trying to work through. So while none of us can really predict the implications for each institution just yet, we can see here from your participants here that some of these cuts could impact us up to 40% of different institutions in terms of student enrollment and impact overall. So one of the things we would like to just offer to you is, as partners here at Devant, we want to be here to support you through these changes. And just to remember that although the numbers are going down, the demand for distinct international student services will go up. So specifically, there was a leaked report on the Trusted Institutional Framework, and there are some, indications that student support services in mental health, career services, housing, and graduate outcomes and retention data are all going to be taken a look at for the future opportunities for study permits and numbers across Canada studying here. So this is where we can assist you. Right now, just for some of you who have not worked with us yet, it's great to see some of our current clients on the call. But for those of you who are not familiar with Devant's core services, we can provide you a range of AI-assisted career tools, content, live events like this event, dedicated to international student career and employment success. Indeed, over the past several months, we've introduced new modules and new resources that are more relevant than ever to help you and your students be successful, both in their employment outcomes, but also in their career development. And Elizabeth, you alluded many times the importance of pre-planning and helping our students get jobs and offers earlier than ever. So in order to support that, we have a number of new curriculum support modules that are specifically focused on international student academic success, workplace etiquette, professional communication, and avoiding plagiarism in Canada. We have new free and up-to-date labor market intel. So if you are interested and you're not on our list, you will receive an email today to follow up, and we'll make sure to get you some of these free resources. We also have a brand new partnership with Kibi Technologies, and that provides mobile job board app with employers that's focused on local employment. It actually translates in up to 17 different languages. It's very accessible, and it's something that we are working to expand across Canada for all of our employers, our students, and our PSC partners. So very excited to talk to you and teach you more about what's happening there to make your jobs easier and helping connect the demand and supply of talent across Canada, both for international students and newcomers to Canada. We're also collecting data and best practices, which we will be sharing with our employers. So if anyone is interested in continuing the conversation, we'd really love to start today and making sure that we can work together to address some of these fast changing requirements that IRCC is putting forward to us, but also to make sure that our students are best served and that we can help them and maintain the best reputation for students, international students coming to Canada. And Elizabeth, we really appreciate your support. Known you for years, and you've always been there supporting employers and students and organizations within the higher education system. So thank you so much for being here. Maybe at this time, we can maybe crowdsource some ideas, Han, if you don't mind. Do you mind maybe just putting up our last Mentimeter? And maybe just asking some information from students about the plans for students. So the questions is what, sorry, go ahead, Han.
Oh, no, it's up, it's there, it's menti.com, just in case, code
Perfect.
4306-7977.
Perfect. So the question is, what resources or student support should be provided to international students affected by this cap? And we will continue to have these conversations, but for everyone who's been here today, here are some of your responses, some of the things that we can do together. Clear messaging about the changes and that Canada is not closed. Absolutely. One of the main reasons for this webinar and this discussion today is just to reassure some of our employers and our partners that, those students who are here and they are eligible, still for their postgrad work permit. You heard from Elizabeth the different paths. Some of the other ideas, our alternative PR pathways, detailed information and guidance. So helping to bridge those students who are in the country or who are coming as well to figure out how they can still get, post-grad work permits or PR or on their way to that through long-term planning, as Elizabeth mentioned. Very informative. Thank you so much for your feedback on the content today. Academic advising, international student RISIA advising, immigration-related resources, counseling, housing and job search resources and advisors, information, online courses, open communication with post-secondaries and government, guarantees on processing times. Elizabeth, wouldn't we love that?
Oh, I wish that would be my dream.
Wow, as they are expanding their resources and using technology and innovation, I really am looking forward to seeing the IRCC processing times. I know they're working on it. They're bringing in new resources, but we would love to have guarantees on processing times. More support and information to students shared with empathy and compassion as they are already stressed out about their situation. Absolutely. One of the things that we're looking at, through some of the content and the events that we offer here, we also offer an ambassador program at Devant. And part of that is really to provide a community of support for students, to make sure that they have community as they're going through all these changes is really important. So thank you for that comment. So, wow, some great comments here. Clear messaging about the changes for students, also support materials for staff, working with students at the different institutions. That's a great comment. So hopefully this session today was a start to help you. I know you already may have support at your institutions, but together we are all facing these changes together, and we will be able to provide you some of the resources. The webinar, this YouTube will be updated, our YouTube page with this session, and Elizabeth has been great at providing more resources. So if you have specific questions or content that you would like us to share in the future, please make sure you fill that out in our feedback form, and we're happy to organize more events. We had about 300 registrations for this webinar, so we know the community really wants to get together, and we're really committed to helping to facilitate that for you. Closer ties with employers to find creative alternatives to the post-grad work permit. That's a really great one as well. And for those of you who may not have seen yet, we are also offering our Get Hired at Home event that's coming up on February 22nd. And thank you for moving the slide. I know we're running out of time, but I will definitely share with you some of the resources, and we are going to have follow-up conversations. I'd really like to invite you to take a look at our virtual career fair on February the 22nd. It really is more of a speed interviewing tool where employers can connect directly with international students from our partner institutions as well as broadly. We're opening it up, and we've made this to really connect employers to students. For the employers who are here on the call, if you have not already registered, I've seen some amazing employers here, such as KPMG, would love to talk with you and to participate in the upcoming Super Screen Day on February 22nd. We're also offering development for students on February 21st to get prepared for that event. So we are here as partners to assist you and make your lives easier and to make our opportunities scalable for students who are facing these changes. So thank you so much for joining today. We hope that this was useful to you, that you had some great information. I just want to also acknowledge our fearless leader, Rod Skinkle, who's on the call as well. Very much a huge champion for international students and PSCs. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions. If you have needs for research or strategy or even questions on housing, as we mentioned, Devant is a subsidiary of Academica with lots of experience in leading strategic enrollment, housing as well, research and planning. So feel free to reach out to Rod if you have those kinds of questions. Right now, I just want to say thank you so much. We're really looking forward to continuing the conversation. If any of this is interesting to you, or you think we can assist you in the future as you face these changes and consider program changes or how you're going to adjust, please reach out to us. We're here and we're looking forward to working with you. Thank you, everyone.